I thought I would have a different response to watching Jack Smith's congressional testimony than the one that I actually had. For me, one of the most heartbreaking and simultaneously infuriating, enraging things about the Biden years is how they slow-rolled justice. They denied the American people justice. Why? Because of politics? Because of Merrick Garland pussyfooting around? Because of his hesitancy? Because of his repeated desire to show extreme deference to Donald Trump and the office of the president? I know there were a few elected officials who were willing to serve on the January 6th Commission. There were elected officials who were willing to sacrifice their entire career. Say whatever you want about Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, but they literally were willing to lose. They lost their jobs over the January 6th Commission. They were willing to break away from all of the MAGA Republicans and try and get justice. Most of our elected officials, including most Democrats, weren't really invested in that at all. Definitely Joe Biden wasn't. They were hoping to just sweep it under the rug. We will just deny the American people justice, and we're just hoping that we'll move on from these awful 4 years. And for me, initially, I had some hope for the January 6th Commission. My second kid and I watched every single hearing together. I was really excited when Jack Smith was finally appointed, but by the time he was, I was already really frustrated because I was like, this is too little, too late. This is him coming in at the 11th hour, and Merrick Garland absolutely delayed and slow walked everything to a point where we were unable to get justice. All of that contributed to where we are now, which is why I will continually say, as long as I live, I will never forgive Merrick Garland. I think he will go down in history as having absolutely, utterly failed the American people and democracy. And I realize it doesn't solely land on his shoulders. And a lot of people have said, well, do you have similar hostility toward Jack Smith? No, I don't. But watching Jack Smith's testimony just confirmed for me, no, Jack Smith was the guy that we needed 6-8 months earlier on this case. And also just to watch somebody who was clearly equipped for the job, clearly able to do the investigative work, clearly had the law and ethics and scruples on his side, and mad skills as well, to just see him be unable to do his job because he was brought in so late and because of all of the political maneuvering on both sides. It just is. Yeah, I watched this testimony and I expected to feel a little bit vindicated. I expected to be oh yes, here's the information we should have had. But all I felt was just really, really angry and sad and let down. We have all been let down. So if you haven't sat down and watched everything that's been released, maybe you've seen some clips like this.
It's pretty significant to subpoena the Speaker of the House's toll records, right?
We followed department policy and we followed all legal requirements in getting those records.
I mean, to get the information you're looking for, nobody disputed the Speaker and the President were having communications on January 6th. So one way you could have gotten that information is you could have asked the Speaker's lawyer to look at his phone records and to give you the information you needed, right?
Well, you say now that nobody's disputing, but my experience in criminal investigations is that people often at trial dispute things that you never thought were going to be in dispute during the investigation. And so when I conduct a criminal investigation, I don't assume there will be no disputes. Having a record that is a hard record about a time, and the timeline of that afternoon was particularly important because that violence started. The president refused to stop it. He endangered the life of his vice president. And he's getting calls, and not calls from Democrats, not calls from people he doesn't know, calls from people he trusts, calls from people he relies on, and still refuses to come to the aid of the people at the Capitol. That's very important evidence for criminal intent.
Right, so Republicans were mad that Jack Smith had wanted to subpoena phone records from Republican elected officials. And here you just see the level of meticulous work that he engaged in, that Jack Smith engaged in this investigation, and how we've all been denied. The American people have been denied their day in court. And I appreciated details like these coming out in his testimony.
The decision to bring charges against President Trump was mine. But the basis for those charges rests entirely with President Trump and his actions, as alleged in the indictments returned by grand juries in 2 different districts. Our investigation developed proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in a criminal scheme to overturn the results of the 2020 election and to prevent the lawful transfer of power. Our investigation also developed powerful evidence that showed that President Trump willfully retained highly classified documents after he left office in January of 2021, storing them at his social club, including in a ballroom and a bathroom. He then repeatedly tried to obstruct justice to conceal his continued retention of those documents. I remain grateful for the counsel, judgment, and advice of my team as I executed my responsibilities. I am both saddened and angered that President Trump has sought revenge against career prosecutors, FBI agents, and support staff simply for doing their jobs and for having worked on those cases. These dedicated public servants are the best of us, and they have been wrongly vilified and improperly dismissed from their jobs. I made my decisions in the investigation without regard to President Trump's political association, activities, beliefs, or candidacy in the 2024 presidential election. We took our actions based on the facts and the law, the very lessons I learned early in my career as a prosecutor. We followed Justice Department policies and observed legal requirements. The timing and speed of our work reflects the strength of the evidence and our confidence that we would have secured convictions at trial. If asked whether to prosecute a former president based on the same facts today, I would do so regardless of whether that president was a Republican or a Democrat.
I've tried several times to film a response to watching that last clip. Watching Jack Smith's testimony, it's just nothing short of infuriating. Like, how do we make sure we, the American people, get justice for what happened? How do we make sure that after this term of Donald Trump's that we get any justice at all? Because look at how all of the political establishment denied us justice last time. For me, I listen to that testimony and I just think of the opportunity cost. I think of all we lost that we could have and should have had as the American people. What elected officials were responsible for that, and also like what money behind those elected officials were responsible for the outcome, the nightmare that we're living now. As a permaculture person, I want to think about how the problem can be the solution. So what are the takeaways from what happened with Jack Smith's investigation, with Merrick Garland, with the Joe Biden years? What is it that we, the American people, need to do to make sure that history doesn't repeat itself after Trump's second term the way that it did after Trump's first? I'll leave you with this last statement from Jack Smith's lawyer, and maybe you, like me, need some time to sit in your feelings after watching it.
Finally, I feel compelled to make an observation about the risks of participating in this deposition. The most powerful person in the world has said that Mr. Smith should be in jail because of his work as special counsel. Not because Jack did anything wrong, but because he had the audacity to follow the facts and the law and apply them to that powerful person. And through its actions, this Justice Department has demonstrated its eagerness to follow President Trump's orders, despite the facts and the law. Yesterday, the president's chief of staff is reported to have confirmed in interviews that the president is indeed pursuing criminal prosecutions against his perceived adversaries as part of a retribution campaign. In the face of those threats, Mr. Smith appears today undaunted, comforted by the knowledge that not only did he do nothing wrong, he conducted his work as special counsel with integrity, impartiality, and an uncompromising commitment to the rule of law.
Actually, one more thing there, because I really want to encourage you and myself and everybody else to have the same kind of courage that Jack Smith has. The defense of democracy does not come without personal risk. When we are looking at a regime that is hell-bent on corruption, hell-bent on retribution, hell-bent on denying us liberty and completely dismantling the rule of law in this country. I do think one positive takeaway from all of this testimony is the demonstration of courage and integrity from Jack Smith, and how we can and should all follow his example as we struggle for justice and we struggle for the restoration of the rule of law.